Joining us now is Associated Press White House reporter Vivian Salama. Vivian, good afternoon to you. So the president called the meeting with the Russians great, but the AP reports a European official said they might stop sharing intelligence. So what does this mean for the fight against terrorism?
Good afternoon. Yes, this revelation has major implications, not just here in Washington, but around the world. For our allies to hear that our president, Donald Trump, may have shared classified information with the Russians or any other country for that matter, that obviously has reverberated around the world, with a lot of countries second guessing whether or not they want to continue the intelligence sharing programs that they may have with the United States. And so we heard from one European official that they are reevaluating that program. Certainly there's been concerns expressed around the world. President Donald Trump says that he didn't do anything that was inappropriate, that he had every right to speak to the Russians about the subject matter that he spoke about. However, there is major concern that he was sharing classified information. And of course, whether or not that is appropriate or not, whether or not that specific information was meant to be shared, some have said that it went outside the boundaries of what is appropriate for the president to do. There are a lot of concerns that the Russians have been using their own intelligence against a number of countries in elections here in the United States, across Europe. There have been concerns that Russians were linked to the major cyber attacks that went on across the world in the last couple of days. And so obviously this is raising major concerns, A, about what the Russians could do with that information, but B, whether or not intelligence is safe with the president of the United States. And so moving forward, that is something that we're going to definitely hear a lot of discussions and a lot of concerns, and President Trump is going to have to explain himself a lot further to a lot of our allies.
Vivian, as you point out, the president does have the constitutional authority to declassify any type of information should he desire, and no one is disputing that. But there has been, for lack of a better word, a lack of communication from the president's communication team when it comes to getting their stories straight as to what the president did and when he did it. It seems almost every time, and you're familiar with this because you are in those briefings on a daily basis. The president or one of his advisors says one thing, the president comes out and contradicts that. In this case, yesterday, H.R. McMaster appeared before you and the rest of the media, and he said that this did not happen. He said the Washington Post story was false, and then the president comes out with tweets later today and says, I absolutely have the right to do it, and in fact, I did do it. What are you hearing now from the White House about what the president is going to say to not keep throwing his people under the bus?
Right, and this wasn't even the first time. We've seen this happen on a number of occasions now where the credibility of this White House has been seriously jeopardized and or questioned by people who say, you know, how do we know whether we trust what is said from the podium, what is said by the president and whatnot? And so we did hear General McMaster yesterday pushing back against the claims that the Washington Post story was saying anything correct. He said that everything that was done was appropriate, the communications were all appropriate, and that the president did not go outside the appropriate boundaries of the communications with the Russians. However, today, no one is really flat out denying it. What General McMaster said today when he addressed the media is that the premise of the story was incorrect, that there were certain elements of it that were not accurate. Yes, he did speak to the Russians about the specific topics in the Washington Post story, and we at the Associated Press have confirmed that he did discuss issues with potential threats that the Islamic State group may be plotting against airlines. However, he said that it was wholly in the boundaries of his right as the president to communicate these issues with the top Russian diplomats. And so whether or not that was the case, the president not denying it. He said it was absolutely in his right as the president to talk about these things with the Russian diplomats. And so the more details we get on exactly what was discussed, the more that will be revealed. However, if it was classified, obviously it raises tremendous concerns, not just here in Washington, but also for the countries that are sharing this information with us. Because remember, it has been said that this information came from a foreign ally. And so that information is for that ally to share, and for President Trump to go then and pass it on to Russia or anyone else is raising a lot of concerns.
All right, so Vivian, we know that the White House is saying that what President Trump did was wholly appropriate, but give us a little more context here about exactly what goes into prepping the president for these foreign meetings.
every single day the president does the daily presidential briefing, and so he is briefed by a number of his top aides. Certainly his national security advisor, General McMaster himself, is often in the room for those, as well as a potential aide, whether from the National Security Council across the street or somebody in the White House, one of his top aides. And so every day it could be different, but generally it's the same few people who brief him on the basic issues. If you have a day like today where you have the president of Turkey visiting, for example, then you may have regional specialists come in and talk to him about those issues, or they may just communicate those issues through General McMaster himself. However, that is basically the gist of it. This is something that the president gets on a daily basis. It's usually on the daily planner that the White House puts out, so we know that he takes them generally in the morning when he's starting his day. And so that's been the routine. Every president has slightly varied in terms of the form that they like to receive their intelligence. President Obama always said to be a reader. He liked to receive his intelligence, in print and read it by himself. President Trump said to be someone that likes to listen and hear his advisors out, so they talk him through these matters every single day. And so that's as far as we know. What he was told on this particular issue, that is still emerging, and we're still trying to press the White House. They're not really giving us that information, but it's definitely interesting to know how much he did know. General McMaster, at the very end of his briefing today, mentioned very casually that the president did not know which country provided the intelligence that he told the Russian diplomats. And so this is something now that we are pressing the White House for, is how come the president didn't know where this information is coming from? Isn't that a core element in these briefings? We're still finding that out.
And Vivian, to that point, that aside that General McMaster said there from the podium about the president not knowing where the source of this intel came from, the Washington Post in their initial report yesterday evening refrained from naming the source, naming the country. That was the source of this intelligence. Now several news outlets are reporting. I wonder if the Associated Press has gotten any more information and clarity on that.
Well, anything could have happened while I was out here waiting to go on camera. But of course, when I left the office, we still had yet to confirm it. The one report that I saw did say, from the New York Times, said that the Israelis were the source of the information. So far, we can't confirm that independently, but that seems to be what the buzz is. Sean Spicer was asked during the daily briefing today if that was the case, and he did not want to address it. And so that remains to be seen from our end, if that's correct.
All right, Vivian Salama at the White House for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks.